It's now time to welcome to the business show Rob Lees from Mortgage Choice Blue Mountains in Penrith for our weekly finance segment. And today, Rob, we're going to talk about understanding and protecting your credit rating.
That's right.
What is a credit rating, Rob, and why is it important?
Credit rating. Well, your credit rating is basically the way that the banks assess the degree of risk in taking on a particular applicant and assessing a particular applicant for a loan. So if your credit report is favourable, it will go through to credit assessment. If your credit report is unfavourable, the loan application will be declined. So that could be if you're applying for a home loan. It might be if you're applying for a car loan or a credit card, but it might even be if you've been shopping down at Harvey Norman and you found a beautiful new lounge suite that you want to purchase and you want to get one of those interest-free loans. You might find if your credit record is unfavourable, they will decline that loan too. So it's very, very important to make sure your credit record's intact.
And sometimes I believe certain organisations will they'll put you on the loan regardless of your credit rating. It doesn't happen very often, but it has been known to happen.
Well, there are some lenders that will lend to people with impaired credit ratings, but they're very, very expensive loans. The fees are high and the interest rates are very high too.
Yeah, you pay for it, don't you?
Yep.
Okay, so tell us what sort of information is collected and recorded on a person's credit file, so in terms of their current situation, and also tell us a little bit about the new comprehensive reporting system.
Yeah, well, I'll talk about that new system in a moment. It's actually in place, but it's not really being used yet. But at the moment, if I could put it into three different categories, three different types of information that's recorded. The first one is credit inquiries. So every time you apply for any form of credit, it will be listed on your credit report as a credit inquiry. So if you apply for a credit card, it'll have, it's with the Commonwealth Bank, it'll have Commonwealth Bank of Australia, credit card, 10,000 limit. So that'll be on there. It'll have all that information listed there. Even if you don't proceed with that loan, it'll still be listed there.
So just asking the question, making the inquiry in the first place puts you on.
Yeah,
right?
well, it should be that the lender shouldn't actually shouldn't access your credit file without your permission. But I've come across it so many times that I think a lot of the times people don't realise that they've actually given permission to the lender to access their credit file. So they might be inquiring about a home loan and they'll ring up their lender. And somewhere along the line there, they must be giving permission because when they come to me for the loan, I'll notice these inquiries there on their credit report, and they might say, well, I didn't know I made a credit inquiry there. I was just asking questions. So every time you make a credit inquiry, and also a lot of the time too, internet inquiries. So I've had clients again too who've hit the apply button when they're shopping around for loans on the internet, not realising that also triggers a credit inquiry. And generally these aren't particularly problematic on your credit record only if there's a lot of credit inquiries. So the banks deem that
if you're shopping around, you would have a lot of inquiries, wouldn't you?
You've got to be really careful you don't have too many credit inquiries. The banks, statistically, a person who has a lot of credit inquiries is a high risk for default. So as a rule of thumb, if you had about 6 credit inquiries in the space of 6 months, that would be an automatic decline on a loan.
Yeah, but what do they take into consideration, for example, if you rack up 6 inquiries in a short period of space, and therefore one could say that, yes, this person is shopping around, I don't suppose that sort of thing is factored in. Is that correct?
They don't want you shopping around, Vince. You don't want to seem too desperate. It's the way the banks do their credit scoring.
Yeah, but surely it's not a matter of desperation, though.
I'm not saying it's fair.
It's a matter of finding due diligence on your own behalf and finding the best deal for yourself.
I think that's a very good reason why it's a good idea to go to a mortgage broker, because we'll do all the research for you without multiple credit inquiries.
There you go.
Good thinking.
So, yeah.
Okay.
I'm still going. So that's the credit inquiries. There's a few more. So credit inquiries, generally not problematic, only if you have a lot of them. Second lot are what you might call credit defaults. They are more problematic, and even just a small credit default is going to cause all sorts of problems for any loan application. So if you're in default with a utility provider, telephone company, electricity, or a loan account, if you've fallen into arrears over at least over a 2-month period, it can be listed as a default. So that's going to be listed on your credit record. It might have Telstra, $300 in default and the date of the default. A lot of people think that when they pay that default that it's removed from their credit record, and it isn't. It will stay on your credit record for 5 years.
It's etched in stone, isn't it?
Well, for 5 years, so it'll actually have the date that you've paid it, but it won't be removed for 5 years. So even a paid credit default can cause a lot of problems for you. Generally, the banks will, with a good explanation, overlook a credit default if it's less than $500 with a utility provider like a telco. But I've had situations where I had one client applying for a home loan of $900,000. The male applicant was working in the mines in Western Australia and was earning about $350,000 a year, strong income, and that loan was held up because of a $150 Telstra default. And it was
that just doesn't make sense.
Basis.
Look, I remember years and years ago, probably eons ago, in fact, I was renting some TV and DVD, or no, they didn't have DVDs back then, a video player from a particular rental company, and the term of the agreement was just about to finish, and I wasn't going to renew. I was going to return the goods, but a day before the contract was up, the house got broken into, and all that gear got stolen.
Oh no!
Now, of course, I did the right thing. I reported it all, etc. But they put me on a bad credit rating because I hadn't returned the equipment, despite the fact that I'd let them know that it had been stolen. And I, in my wisdom, deemed that to be extremely unfair. But gee, it caused a lot of dramas for me.
It causes huge havoc, and I think we'll talk about that in a little while as to what you can do about that.
That's
but
right.
A lot of listings are unfair and inappropriate, and it can cause all sorts of issues. Third area, if I can just mention that too, is if there's any bankruptcies going to be listed there. Also, any Part 9 or 10 debt agreements that are under the Bankruptcy Act are going to be listed there. They're obviously unfavourable. They're going to stay in your credit report for 7 years, and any court judgments or pending court judgments are going to all be there. So it's better to be upfront and disclose anything that you know is going on. So that's pretty much how it is at the moment. The comprehensive reporting system is a system that's operating in other parts of the world. At the moment, the limitations of our system are that it lists credit inquiries even if they didn't proceed. So it's going to list particularly current loan contracts, what the balance outstanding is at the moment, and the conduct on that account. So there's going to actually be more information there, and it's going to mean that where people have been able to fly under the radar before by going to another lender, that isn't going to be possible under this regime. The thing that's holding it up is that you've got to be willing to share more information. That is, the lender needs to be able to share more information in order to obtain more information. And none of the banks seem to want to make the first move.
Okay, interesting.
But eventually it will come in.
Do you think Santa Claus references this information to see who's been good or bad?
I think he could probably subscribe to Vader, and he'd get some very helpful information.
Okay, well, we're going to find out what you can do if you've been listed as a bad credit and it's been done so incorrectly after this quick music break. This is James Taylor with Shower the People.
You can play the game and you fall right here. Shower the people.
And that was James Taylor with Shower the People. You're listening to The Business Show on 89.1 Radio Blue Mountains, and we're back with Rob Lees. And Rob, now it sounds like it's very important to know what's on your credit file. Can you obtain a copy of your credit file, and is there a process for disputing any incorrect or unfair listings that you find there?
Yes and yes. So you can obtain
Jolly
a
good.
copy.
And my next question is, no, sorry, Rob.
So you can obtain a copy of your credit report by there's a number of credit reporting agencies. The most well-known is VEDA, VEDA, and you can obtain a copy of your credit report by going to www.mycreditfile.com.au. If you want to obtain an instant copy of your credit report, it'll cost you $50. If you want to wait for 2 or 3 weeks for it to arrive by snail mail, it won't cost you anything. Or if
that's because it's cheaper to send things by snail mail than it is
yes,
to email
that's
them. Is
right.
that right?
Or
Yeah.
if you're meeting with
Okay.
me, if you sign a privacy form, I can obtain a copy of it. It costs me $8, and I'll wear the cost. So I do that for clients if they're a little unsure about what might be on their credit report. In terms of disputing, again, Veda has on the website. There's information there as to how you can dispute a listing. But in summary, I guess it's a legal thing that when credit providers list a default, there's a process that they're supposed to follow, and that process is, well, firstly, it needs to be in at least 60 days default, and they need to have written a letter to advise you, to warn you that you're in default. And if you don't pay your bill, that you're going to be listed, your file will be listed as default. So it really is about legally gathering information and evidence that will prove that was inappropriately listed. So in your situation, Vent, that you mentioned there, you might obtain evidence that the goods were stolen. It might be a police report or something like that. But it's gathering the evidence and producing that to the credit. The credit agency, so that that default can actually be reviewed. I've found that probably, a lot of these, like you felt indignant when that occurred, that happens quite often.
I
for
was
people.
more than peeved.
And
let me tell you.
to put it politely, I find probably about 80 or 90% of people who have listings there are inappropriately listed or have been listed because of just an oversight. And there is some form of recourse that's worth the fight, even though it's a real horrible process.
Well, fortunately, it was well over 5 years ago, so that's history.
So
and
clear
it's
history
dead
now.
in the water.
That's good.
So, Rob, what advice do you have for our listeners to protect their credit rating?
Most important is make sure you pay your bills on time. That's it. Make sure you make your loan payments on time. We were talking earlier, Heather, about reminders, direct debits,
Yes.
making sure you have a direct debit. Sometimes, of course, people have direct debits, but then there isn't enough cash in the account because they haven't transferred it in. For a few of my direct debits, I've actually got little calendar notes in my electronic calendar for me to check a few days before to make sure there's enough cash there.
Yeah, like
So-
a safety backup procedure.
Yeah,
sort
that's
of
right.
thing,
That's
yeah.
right. So make sure you pay your bills on time. And I think the other thing is, if there's changes in your circumstances, make sure you inform the credit providers. Change of address, very important. Also, I think particularly, let me say, in terms of if there's a marriage breakup or a separation, they're the most common when things occur because one assumes the other one's going to look after loan payments or bill payments, and a lot of defaults occur during that period. So being vigilant about those sorts of things. And if you are experiencing hardship, you can contact the lender, and it's better to contact the lender and let them know that you're having difficulties paying and work out some kind of arrangement.
Yeah, usually they'll be quite reasonable, and they anybody, whether it's a lender or a supplier
Yep.
or whatever, will always prefer to be contacted and say, look, I'm having troubles.
That's right. It's better,
what can we work out?
to be proactive about it rather than passive and letting the account be defaulted.
Absolutely. Well, Rob, again, as always, sterling advice. Thank you very much again for
Good to be
joining
here
us on
again.
the show. And you can contact Mortgage Choice, Blue Mountains in Penrith on 4739 9749 or visit their office at 3/13 Hope Street in Blaxland. And we'll see you again next week, Rob.
See you next week.
Thanks, Rob.